Hello, my B4 class. Sorry I'm not able to be with you today, but I wanted to kind of go through the expectations for the project that we are going to be doing. So your project is going to be due at the end of class on Friday, December 1st. So Friday is a B day, so we will have some time in the classroom to continue working on the project, and I will be there that day to answer questions that you may have. So anyways, in this project, you are going to be choosing one of the four data sets that I have provided for you. And these are actual real data sets that I have done research about. And you're going to be analyzing the data. So what you need to be doing on the project is I'm going to require you to compare the measures of center across the two groups. So this is computing the mean, the median, and the mode. And then comparing the spread of the data. So you're going to be computing things like the IQR, and then you're going to create a box and whisker plot to visually represent the data across the two groups, and you're going to offer commentary on the study design by thinking about the sampling method and the study method, and identifying the population and the sample, and then you're going to discuss sort of the pros and cons and the usability of the data. So what I'm looking for in a quality poster is that you include the raw data and then also illustrative descriptions that outline how you came up with the computations. And you should be able to explain it in terms that somebody who's maybe never seen this stuff before can understand it. Now, when you're working on this project, everybody is going to have to submit their own work. This is for a mastery grade. It is required that you are on task the whole period. And keep in mind that this is due at the end of Friday. You may ask questions of your peers, so please do not get up out of your seat to do this, but you can ask people questions around you. And I think it's really good that you have those conversations. You can take the technology to go to the haiku page. So if you go to the skill tabs, quarter two skills, you can actually go and there's a section with the PowerPoint that will be going through the sample project, and I'm going to supply the sub with hard copies of the sample project. I'm also going to provide this document that you can access at all times. And then I encourage you to get decorative and creative after you have met the requirements. What you will be evaluated on. You're going to be evaluated on the summary statistic computations. So, and what you can see here is sort of a checklist of the requirements. And you can just check them as you go. So, I expect that you compute the mean, the median, and the mode. I also expect that you compute Q1, Q3, IQR. And whenever applicable, I want you to discuss the outliers. And you can see what the 1 point, the 2 point, the 3 point, the 3.5, and the 4 is going to be looking like on that scale. And if you are referring to the outliers and computing the sample statistics accurately, that's what it takes to get a 4. Skill 20A, comparing two sets of data. So for this, what I am looking for is that I'm looking for you to divide the data into two groups, and the data will have already been divided into the two groups. Sorry about that. Computer's just acting up a little bit. I'm also going to expect that you're comparing the centers of the data. So you're going to be thinking about which set of data is going to have a higher mean and median. You're going to compare the spread and the variability of the data. Which data is more consistent and has less variation? Which data is more variation? And you're also going to be kind of thinking about, particularly effective posters are going to be thinking about, what are the limitations? What could be done, in further studies to improve? What I saw a student that actually said, okay, here's an outlier. What happens if I take out the outlier? How does it impact the mean and the median? You're also going to create a box and whisker plot for both data sets. So I should be seeing that not only is it accurate, but you are also putting it on a scale, number line, with a consistent scale, and then it also has a title. And then you're going to also be thinking about the sampling type. So is it a random sample? Is it systematic? Is it going to be a convenience sample? And then also, think about whether it's an observational study versus a survey or a controlled experiment. So I'm also going to introduce the data sets. So the data sets, you have 4 choices. Data set 1, you're largely asking the question, is LeBron a better basketball player than Stephen Curry, or vice versa? And I have compiled a list on ESPN.com of all the games played so far in the month of November. And these are the points scored in each game by LeBron, Stephen Curry. Data set 2. If you're a car person, this is a good data set to look at. And this is one of my favorite magazine, Consumer Reports. So what Consumer Reports does is they buy a vehicle model, and they actually have an anonymous person go and buy the car, and they test the things like acceleration times, and that's what we're using here, of the Ford models and the GM models. So for instance, the 9.2, Consumer Reports bought a Ford Fusion, tested it, and found that the 0 to 60 for it was 9.2 seconds. I also found the 15 most recent real estate listings in here in Morton Place and Carmel on Realtor.com. And these are prices in thousands for these. And then data set 4 is a really fascinating data set. This is called the Cook Partisan Voter Index, which looks at each state and sees on average how many points, based off of recent election results, how many points is the Democratic or the Republican candidate going to win by. So, for instance, my home state of Ohio has a Cook PVI of +3. So this means that on average, the Republican candidate, if you're looking at average Democrat versus average Republican candidate, the Republican candidate is going to win by 3 percentage points. Now, there's kind of some situations where, let's say there's a candidate is being accused of like sexual harassment or something. That's obviously going to alter things, and maybe that candidate is not so average anymore. But this is just looking at the average Republican versus Democrat. Negative numbers mean Democrat leaning, positive numbers mean Republican leaning. And you're going to be looking at the Midwest versus the Southeast. And these are each Midwestern state and each Southeastern state. And our goal here is that we want to compare sort of the average political index here. I will be providing you today with sample statistics projects. So I actually looked at the median household income in thousands of Midwestern states versus Northeastern states. So this is the data over here. And what we notice here is that in Indiana, the median household income is $49.2 thousand. In the Northeast, we have like West Virginia, one of the poorest states in the country, at $41.8 thousand, and the wealthiest state in the country, like Maryland, at $74.6 thousand. I would suggest, so with your poster or portfolio, you can have the project in either a poster or a portfolio. You may want to have some space on your poster, or maybe some shown work attached, and you can do the computation. And then after you do the computation, I think it's particularly effective if you make sort of a chart that compares the minimums, the Q1s, the medians, the Q3s, the maxes, the ranges, and the IQRs. And you can compare the means across the data sets. Also, I want to see that you are creating both box plots for both of the 2 groups within your data set. And I think it's really nice to put them side by side because you can compare. And we can see that Northeast has kind of a higher income, but the data is more spread out. And in the Midwest, the data is less spread out, but the income is a little bit lower. And you can see that I created some descriptions about the centers and the spreads with the data. And then I also want you to compare the data. So some good insights could be Like the Northeast has more states that have major metropolitan centers. People who live in major metropolitan centers are more often going to be earning more income. Cost of living is higher. You could say something like that the wealthy states in the Northeast are, considerably wealthier than the wealthier states of the Midwest. And we can see in both groups that the mean and the median are, relatively the same. And there's no effects, particularly from the outliers. So we can actually see in the Northeast that we have maybe an outlier on the high end and the low end. So it kind of just balances it out a little bit. But when you get to this section, so after you kind of computed the raw data, this is, cut in stone. There's a correct versus incorrect answer. When you get down to the section where you're kind of interpreting the data after you're comparing, this is where you can kind of have some personal insight. You may want to also think about how the study was done. So I kind of had a systematic sample here where we looked at the median person in each state to kind of make some inferences about the Midwest versus the Northeast. Maybe a limitation here is that we kind of valued the person from North Dakota the same as the person from Illinois in the Midwestern data set, even though there's a lot more people in Illinois. And there's some place here where you could be very original for that. So we're going to be working on the statistics project, not only during class time this class, but we're also going to be working on the statistics project during class the next class. So we're going to have some designated time, and it will be due at the end of class on Friday. I encourage people who are good at what they're doing with this project to help out the people who are maybe a little bit more confused. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions as you are working on it. And this will also be your homework assignment for tonight. I hope that you have a very productive day. Thank you very much.